All right, today we're jumping into a wonderfully quirky story from the golden age of Indian cinema. It's a fantastic tale based on the writings of Ashokamitran, all about artists, ambition, and a really strange mystery that took years and years to solve.
So, let's start with this question. What do poets have to do with pancakes? I know, it sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, right? But it's actually the key to a strange but true story set in one of India's most important early film studios, the legendary Gemini Studios in Chennai.
And first things first, let's solve that little riddle. You see, Pancake wasn't breakfast. It was the brand name for the go-to makeup of the era. I mean, we're talking everybody from Hollywood's Greta Garbo to Indian cinema's Vijay and Tamala used it. And Gemini Studios, they bought the stuff by the truckload.
So, that brings us to where our story really kicks off, right in the chaotic, creative, and, well, really hot heart of the studio, the makeup department.
Picture this. The makeup room was set up in what everyone believed were Robert Clive's old stables. It was lined with these massive mirrors, and each one was surrounded by huge, incandescent light bulbs. The heat was so intense, it literally baked the actors sitting in those chairs. Fiery misery is right. And here's the wild part. The whole point of all this makeup and misery wasn't to make people look good. It was to make them look, well, hideous. Back then, with all the indoor shooting and harsh lights, you had to turn a perfectly normal-looking person into a crimson-colored monster up close, just so they'd look presentable on film. Talk about irony.
You know, just like in any good movie, Gemini Studios was a world absolutely filled with unforgettable characters. And believe me, every single one of them had a very specific place in the pecking order.
And this just lays it all out, doesn't it? The hierarchy was super strict, even in the makeup room. The chief makeup man, he got the stars. Then his senior assistant got the second leads, and so on down the line. And right at the very bottom of that ladder, the guy who slapped paint on the extras, the so-called office boy. Now this office boy, he wasn't a boy at all. He was a man in his 40s, a frustrated artist who dreamed of being a poet or a director. And he funneled all that frustration, all his anger, at one person, Kotamangalam Subbu. Subbu was the number 2 guy at the studio, and he was everything the office boy wasn't. He was cheerful, loyal to the boss, and a multi-talented genius who just seemed to succeed at everything.
And the place was full of odd characters. Take the story department. It was filled with poets and writers, but it also had a lawyer. And this guy, he was the definition of a fish out of water. He wore a suit and tie while everyone else was in traditional khadi. He was a man of cold logic among all these dreamers, and he once basically destroyed a great actress's career. And the ultimate irony? He lost his job when they shut down the department he never seemed to fit into in the first place.
Okay, so you've got this whole cast of characters, right? The frustrated office boy, the brilliant Subbu, the out-of-place lawyer. Well, this is where the plot really thickens. The studio, which had this quiet dislike of communism, is about to get a very, very unexpected visitor.
So, to get what happens next, you need a little backstory. The folks at Gemini Studios were generally anti-communist, so when this huge 200-person group called the Moral Rearmament Army showed up, the studio welcomed them with open arms. They put on these super professional plays that actually ended up influencing Tamil drama for years.
Then, the real mystery began. A few months later, word comes down that another foreigner is visiting. The only thing anyone knows is that he's a poet, from England. You can just imagine the whispers, right? Who is it? Wordsworth? Tennyson? Nobody had a clue.
So in walks this tall, super serious, very English man. He gets up on stage and speaks for a solid hour. But his accent was so thick, so foreign, that nobody, and I mean nobody, understood a single word he said. The whole audience just sat there in this dazed, confused silence.
And just like that, he was gone. He left behind this giant question mark hanging over the entire studio. What on earth was a serious English poet doing at a Tamil film studio that made movies for, the simplest sort of people? It made absolutely zero sense.
For years, that was it. Just a total mystery until a random, chance discovery in a library finally started to connect the dots.
Our narrator, Ashokamitran, the guy who worked at the studio, he's just going about his business one day and sees this tiny ad in a newspaper. It's for a short story contest held by some British magazine he'd never even heard of called The Encounter. So he thinks, hey, maybe I should check out this magazine before I send them my story. He heads over to the British Council library, finds a copy, and as he flips it open, bam, the editor's name just about jumps off the page at him.
And you know that feeling when a memory just clicks? A bell starts ringing deep in his mind. The editor's name was Stephen Spender. It was him. That was the name of the mysterious poet from Gemini Studios. The first huge piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place.
Okay, so he's got the who, but the why? That was still a total blank. And the final piece of the puzzle, it wouldn't show up for years, and in the most random place imaginable.
Fast forward a few years. Our narrator has left Gemini Studios far behind. He's just browsing one of those bookstalls on a footpath and picks up this cheap paperback for 50 paise. Its title was The God That Failed. He opens it up and sees it's a collection of essays. 6 really famous writers, each one telling the story of their journey into communism and their bitter disappointment with it. And as he scans the list of authors, there it is again. André Gide, Richard Wright, Ignacio Silone, Arthur Koestler, Louis Fisher, and Stephen Spender.
And that was it. That was the light bulb moment. Suddenly, this dark, dusty room in his mind just completely lit up. The studio's anti-communist vibe, the visit from that theater group, and now this poet who had famously written about leaving communism. It all made perfect sense.
You see, the boss of Gemini Studios, S.S. Vasson, he probably couldn't have cared less about Stephen Spender's poetry. But Stephen Spender, the famous intellectual who had turned his back on the God that failed, communism, that was a guy he was very interested in. The visit wasn't about art at all. It was about politics.
It's just a wild reminder, isn't it? How these huge global political forces can ripple out and find their way into the most unlikely corners of the world. Like a hot, crowded makeup room in a film studio in South India. What a strange but absolutely true story.